Hey, this is Joy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a grunge inspired card to share with you. I am hopping along with a Facebook group called Card Hoppin. And what we do is we bring different techniques each month, and we are focusing on grunge and clean and simple. So I start out by prepping my Bristol Smooth cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, and then I stamp the Flights of Fancy stamp set from makerforte with Versamark ink and my Misty, making sure to get a good impression. And then I come in with my fine detail gold embossing powder, and I make sure to get a really good coat. Now I am using Bristol because I'm going to come in with a lot of different inks and a lot of water. So I'm using my Wagner heat tool to heat this because it's at a much hotter temperature, and that comes in play later on because you're going to see that I use a different tool to dry my layers. I also repeated that process with the curly Q-tail of the butterfly from the same stamp set. Now I am coming in with the pumice stone distress oxide just to put down a base layer, and I did wet down my brush because I wanted more of a watercolor smooth blend. Now my brush did have a little bit of brown on it, but that didn't make a difference to me. I just wanted to get a nice layer down. So now I'm coming in with ground espresso distress oxide, and I put that down on a glass mat and spritz it with my distress sprayer and then rub my fingers through it. And I do that because I want a painterly effect, and I smush that down sort of in a diagonal design. And then from there I bring in my heated tool, and the reason I'm using the heated tool is because it's at a much lower temperature than the heat gun, so I have no risk of melting my embossing powder. Next I come in with distress inks, which are spiced marmalade and fossilized amber, and I do the same thing. I spritz this with the distress sprayer, and I do some ink smushing. Now you're going to notice that the distress oxides are kind of a milky color, and that's why they call it oxides, but the distress inks are very vibrant, and I wanted to get both of those looks going down so that they would play on each other, and some would pop and some would kind of meld into the background. And again, I just want to be clear that I heat set each one of these applications so that I don't lose the textures and the colors of each of them. And I come back in and I smush some more. And depending on the look that you want, you either apply a lot of water or you don't. Another way that you can get some really nice nuggets of color is if you use a craft mat, and that'll give you kind of the fine pinpoints, but I wanted more of a watercolor look. Now I'm coming in with my cottontail blending brushes from the Rabbit Hole Designs, and I am blending the spiced marmalade along the outside edges of my card. There's really no rhyme or reason for it. Again, I'm just trying to get different textures and different pops of color in this. I've got multiple layers that are going to be going down. And I like this spiced marmalade, but I thought it needed some pops of yellow, so I brought in the fossilized amber distress ink, and I start blending that, and then that's when you're going to start to see that the distress oxides that are in the far background start to pop. And again, I am not going for a smooth look. I am trying to get this as blotchy as can be because my whole goal was to have a grunge look. Then now I am coming in with the Ticket to Ride stamp set from makerforte. I'm using one of the postal stamp images, and I'm putting that down with the ground espresso as well, and I am just using my fingers to do that. I didn't want good impressions. Again, this is just a background. It's all going to meld together. And then I am using the whatever ink is left on my brush to again kind of to make it splotchy and grungy. Now I am bringing in a stencil from Sweet and Sassy. I believe it's the script stencil. And I'm bringing in the fossilized amber and the spiced marmalade, and I am putting that through. Again, I'm not trying to do the whole stencil. I'm just putting in different bits and pieces of it just to add to the background. Once I am happy with that, I do trim this down to be, I believe it was 3.5 by 4 3/4 inches. And for my final step on this, I bring in the vintage photo, and this is where I'm coming back in and I am inking around the edges, forming a vignette. Even though my butterfly is stamped off the page, it is not a centered focal point. I still want this panel to ultimately be my focal point in my card, if that makes any sense. So while I finish up this ink blending, I do encourage you to click on the links below and see what the other participants are bringing to the table. I am taking a piece of like burnt sienna cardstock, and I am embossing the butterfly image again with Versamark, and then applying the fine detail gold powder. And that's because I thought that the gold embossed butterfly kind of lost its pop value in the background, which originally I was going for. Kind of changed my mind. So I melt that again with my Wagner heat gun, and I leave more of the embossing in for this just because it really showed up nicely on camera. And if you're like me, watching the embossing powder never gets old. It's my absolute favorite technique in card making. It was probably one of the first techniques I learned, so I did leave that in. Then I decided to fuzzy cut this image, and for the sake of time, I didn't leave that in. And then I glued down the panel to a black piece of cardstock, and I used my ink smooshing tool to smooth those layers. I then mount a piece of the metallic gold brushed cardstock onto a 5x7 card base, and then I apply the butterfly to it after popping up the focal panel with foam adhesive. Here are some last shots of my card, and you'll see that I just put a simple sentiment on that. Again, thank you so much. I would appreciate it if you would consider subscribing. Until next time, keep crafting. Bye-bye, my friends.